6 now, and this morning off to a little bit of a wet start in parts of the area. Some light rain falling in Murray, Kentucky. Little system coming up from the south. It's just kind of clipped our area just enough of a moving close enough to us anyway that some of us are getting a little bit of rain. That rain won't last long. It'll clear out this morning, and by the afternoon we're going to be back to sunshine and warm temperatures, and that's really the biggest story for the next several days. Not feeling like November. 10-15 degrees above average for daily high temperatures over most of the next week. Couple little exceptions in there. One of those exceptions is going to be Saturday, when we end up with our second straight wet weekend. And this weekend, also a reminder, it's fallback weekend, so we get that extra hour of sleep Saturday night. We also have those earlier sunrise and sunset times starting on Sunday. Light rain here across western Kentucky. Some of that rain now getting up toward Calvert City, Eddyville, Princeton, Benton. Looking at some light raindrops. Still a few sprinkles and light showers toward Murray and down toward Union City and Martin. This is a little system's going to be pulling off to the east over the next couple of hours, and you already see the back edge of the clouds here out over Missouri. It won't take long for those clouds to clear out of here later today. Current temperatures are running anywhere from 53 in Carbondale, 61 in Paducah, 55 in Mayfield, 59 in Kennett, Missouri, 56 in Hopkinsville. We'll have a couple of light raindrops, 7, even 8 o'clock this morning in Kentucky, but by noon, most of us are already starting to get back into sunshine. Afternoon highs today will run in the upper half of the 70s. Clear tonight, that'll allow temperatures to drop back into the upper 40s, around 50. And tomorrow afternoon, highs coming up into the upper 70s with plenty of sunshine for your Thursday. Heading into the weekend, we've got rain on the way, with most of the area set to pick up between about a ½ inch and an inch of rain through Saturday. And rain will be tapering off by Sunday. A little earlier arrival of the rain compared to what we showed you yesterday. It now looks like Saturday morning. Rain will be here continuing Saturday afternoon, and by Saturday evening, the system is just about over with and out of here. So 77 today, cloudy skies this morning, sunny this afternoon, 79 and sunny tomorrow, 80 on Friday. It gets breezy Friday into Saturday. Wind gusts by Saturday morning could be over 30 miles per hour, and then decreasing after the rain moves out. 73 sunny, nice second half of the weekend, and warm for the start of next week. 77 Monday, 79 on Tuesday.
Thank you, Trent. We have finally received some rain across our area, but how much of an impact has it had on drought conditions? You're taking a live look right now out at the Ohio River at Cairo, Illinois, where you can see river levels there. Well, they're still at an all-time low. Despite rainfall reaching a quarter to an inch last week, drought conditions have remained the same. But the one area that's all changed, immediate fire concerns.
We've learned this morning that Graves County's burn ban has been lifted, and this comes after several other bans were lifted in other parts of the Local 6 region already. You can find a full list of those online at WPSCLocal6.com. But back to the river levels, the lack of rainfall has impacted the majority of smaller rivers, but the larger ones, like the Ohio, much more. The manager of TVA's Forecast Center, James Everett, says the TVA is continuing to adjust to the dry weather.
So we manage it in an integrated manner. So we're releasing water from dams like we normally would. Some of these dams store enormous volumes of water, and so we're doing things to support using this water to provide flows for water quality, to provide flows for water supply, to provide stable flows.
And Everett says they are working to provide stable flows for navigation. Mary Lamb with the National Weather Service also says to get back to normal, we're going to need to see about 3 to 5 inches of more rain in the next few months. So the drought's already brought the Mississippi River down to its lowest level in years. And if there's not relief soon, we're all going to feel it. The cost of shipping will spike.
The price of moving a bushel of soybeans went up 300%, and there are thousands of barges full of food that can't be moved in these low river levels. The Army Corps of Engineers says they're watching water levels closely, but if the problem goes on, they may have a solution.
To a point. In 1989 and then again in 2012, we got to an area where to a level where the channel was almost unsustainable. So we had numerous dredges working, and there was very little commerce going through it. Ultimately, what saved the day was rain.
Ooh, that video. These days, when you wish for rain, you have to specify, not all at once. The Midwest is still recovering from summer flash floods, and if that water cycle whiplashes again, hard rain on parched earth would be another blow to farmers already struggling to move their harvest. At this point, you probably know how to use Siri to play music and type out a text for you. Did you know my Siri's a he, can become your own personal receptionist?
We'll explain right after the break, he or she. The time is 6:41. You're watching Local 6 Today.
This week, can't miss mornings on Today. Football legend Terry Bradshaw shares his story. Yellowstone star Cole Hauser on the news.
It's extraordinarily sad. I'm going to back it up just for a second. It's extraordinarily sad whenever people ignore some of the things that the founder of the Windmill Ministries has been trying to put out now for 30 some odd years about these major displacencies that are going to happen in the last days pertaining to the mighty Mississippi starting to dry up. I know that whenever I made those statements and I put out that particular material in the early 90s, I was mocked, laughed at, made fun of. People thought that, once more, this is an individual that's just trying to seek some sort of celebrityism in him putting out these warnings or these advisories, just like me telling the people up in northwest Kentucky here in Land Between the Lakes that that there was going to be major electrical disturbances. What people don't realize is that the way that our grid system is set up in America, we probably get, I'm going to say, a third of our power, electricity, energy, from our river channels, especially over here on this side of America, right in this particular area. Now, if you go on up towards New York and up towards Washington, D.C., they've got, even over in eastern Kentucky, they've got nuclear reactors over there that power them. But for the people that has to rely upon to the electricity sources that come from the water pertaining to the turbines turning because of the water flowing in the turbines, we are going to be looking at major electrical disturbances in the future to come. Because if you look at the book of life in the same sense that I have looked at it in, towards it not just being figuratively but being literal in the regards towards the Great Tribulation periods, our period, you will see that basically everything upon to the planet Earth becomes displacent. It becomes almost inhabitable in comparison to the normalcy of where and how that we used to conduct our lives. During the Great Tribulation period, these things are going to become so abstract and unordinary that it's going to actually cause the death of people's lives. Just like, let's just look at the Hoover Dam that supplies all the electricity to Vegas and a great deal of electricity out to the Northern California range out there and places out in Utah. They're saying that that water level right now is about 175 feet below where it ought to be, according to the gauges where they was in 1983. They're also saying that if we don't have a tremendous winter with a lot of water fallout back into Lake Mead or the Colorado River, that right now the people are on a tier 2 out there because of the water situation, towards people not being able to water their yards and basically wash their cars. But if this occurs towards not getting that type of a winter, they're going to immediately go to tier 2 sometimes in the spring. And if it gets that bad, the turbines that produce the electricity in the Colorado River has to be at a certain depth, and if that water level falls below that to the point that the turbines are getting too hot, then they have to shut the turbines down. And you may be thinking, well, that's them over there. It is them over there. But if it's going to be affecting them over there, do you not think it's going to be affecting us over here? And it may not necessarily be the fact that our water level will lower so badly that the TVA can't get its turbines to turn, but it's always a possibility. Now, they're saying the reason why that we have become so dry so quick is because of lack of rain. But then again, there's areas this year that has gotten entirely too much rain. Texas being one of them, Jackson, Mississippi being another one. For the past 5 years, we've seen New Orleans flood 2 or 3 different times. We've seen Houston, Texas flood a time or two before. And of course, last year, about a year and a half ago, going on a year and a half ago now, we had a big flood up here in Waverly, Tennessee, in Humphreys County, in Middle Tennessee, that dumped about 17 inches of rain that basically took out probably 15 to 20% of their living dwelling at that time. Whenever God showed me these things in the early 90s, after me receiving a spiritual wonder, people thought that I was absolutely bonkers. They thought that I'd absolutely lost my mind. They didn't want to have nothing to do with me. And to this day, I still got people around here locally. Some of them go to Alamo Baptist Church. Some of them go to the First Baptist Church. Some of them go to other churches in Kenton or Sharon, Tennessee, that to this day still won't speak to me because they are this offended. And the thing about it is, they shouldn't be offended at me because I was trying to help them the whole time. If they should be offended at anybody, they should be offended in themselves because they didn't pay enough attention to the message coming from the messenger. That's who they should be offended in. Whenever God instructs people of certain things that's fixing to happen, he doesn't do that because he's wanting to hurt them. He does that because he's wanting to help them to prepare themselves of these things that are going to be fallen or not fallen, that's going to cause these type of complications upon the people's lives. Obviously, the people up here in Kentucky took it all out of context. These very people right here actually filmed the proceedings and put it on their news, though they claim that they didn't use nobody's name, of shutting down the Kentucky Dam in 2007, long about June or July. I've tried to find those records on their news channel, and as far as I know, they've been deleted or they're just not available to get. I don't know why, because everything that they do is supposed to be public record. But they shut down the dam after the individual that's talking to you right now tried to warn them people about major electrical disturbances that was coming down the pike in 207. A matter of fact, it got so hot, the Tennessee River got so low that down in the Alabama area, down somewhere around the down below Pickwick, there was one of the dams that the turbines started overheating and they had to shut down the turbines because the water had gotten so low and the water had gotten so hot. These things is all dealing with commerce, and they're all dealing with the trajectory of how we get our electricity pertaining to electrical disturbances. Why them people thought that I was going to create the electrical disturbances is still to this day beyond any type of explanation coming from the professionals that, once more, took things out of context to the point that they actually took me to Mayfield, Kentucky later on that night after they shut down the dam and they couldn't find no bombs on the dam of somebody that was going to purposely create electrical disturbance. Took me to Mayfield, Kentucky. I sat in front of a doctor for about 2 hours while she was questioning me, while 2 Kentucky state troopers sat in the lobby waiting for me, I guess, to be admitted to some sort of a psychiatric behavior center called the Four Rivers Behavior Center. And ultimately, when it was all said and done with, she said, "Mr. Jackson, they have made a mistake with you. They need to let you go." Which once more put them in a clinker, because now they thought that they was just going to be able to go up and go home, but instead of going home, now they had to take me back to Paducah, Kentucky, along about 3:30 in the morning, and drop me off to the point that I had to remain exposed to the elements for 2 or 3 hours before the sun come up. And I went over into a graveyard and slept on somebody's grave that night, not having no idea whose grave that I was sharing that sleep with, while I was being ate up by mosquitoes because it was hot. Like I said, it was somewhere around June or July, either the last part of June or first part of July is whenever all these occurrences took place, simply because of an individual that was trying to help by warning and putting out advisories of electrical disturbances. And to see the very things that I had predicted now manifesting themselves towards the Mississippi River beginning to run low or beginning to run dry is only an indication that instead of me being insane, I'm actually in more tune with reality towards being sane, especially since the very things that I had already predicted, or forecasted are now manifesting themselves more and more every year. More and more every year. Like I said, if you get to looking at Revelations in the King James Version Bible, you will understand that the horrors coming from that book go beyond most people's imagination to the degree that they either can't comprehend what Revelations is talking about, or they really don't want to comprehend. Well, you know, you can want in one hand and poo-poo in the other and see which one fills up the quickest. And I guarantee you it's probably going to be the one that you're poo-pooing in, because the one that you're wanting in, you can want all day long for things not to occur, and they're still going to occur. Whenever Jesus gave us the prophecies of the end time events, that these things are going to be what you should be looking for, he nailed it on the head 100%. And he wasn't telling us those things to hurt us. He was telling us those things to prepare us. Especially whenever you're dealing with a planet right now with over 8 billion people on it. 8 billion. This year alone, we have seen some of the most catastrophic events happen on the other side of the planet, pertaining to great floods or famines. One or the other. And some of these drought-stricken areas is so bad that even their livestock cannot even sustain those type of environments. So obviously, whenever they started talking years and years ago, especially since the year 2000, about global warming, obviously they wasn't joking about these things, was they? Well, you see, I've had to go not only up against those powers, those resisting powers pertaining to the climate deniers, but I've also had to go up against the church community that once more wanted these things not to occur. Well, you can want in one hand and do something else in the other and see which one fills up the
Burn
quickest.
ban has been
And
lifted.
like I
This comes
said,
after-
it ain't going to be the one that you want in, because you can want all day long. And just because you want things to happen doesn't mean that they're going to happen the way that you want them. I just got through talking to a farmer last night pertaining to these situations pertaining to moving this grain around. And according to him, that they have made some sort of new deal. It's costing more money to do this, but instead of transporting the grain, the cargo, on ship pertaining to putting it on barges, they're now moving it on rail or moving it on truck, still getting it to its destinations. But by getting to its destinations, it's costing more money. They jabbed the farmer this year somewhere around $1 a bushel extra once they realized what that they was facing off on, in trying to confiscate the differences of what it was going to cost originally versus what it's going to cost now extra to move that same cargo. Eventually, especially if you have these type of irregularities again and again and again, there will not only be electrical disturbances if the water gets too low to the point that the turbines can't turn, but eventually this stuff will hit us directly in the pocketbook towards other things that's already hitting us pertaining to the war in Ukraine, other major weather events that's happening on the other side of the continent, that's either coming in the form of floods or famines pertaining to no water. This stuff is going to affect us. And like I said, you can sit and you can want all day long for these things not to occur. But Jesus foreseen these things that was going to be occurring, to the point that he even told his disciples at the time that he told them to flee into the mountains whenever you shall see these things occurring. Why? Because of all the commotions, because of all the problems that are going to be developed because of these things towards humanity basically being displaced out of normalcy in abnormalcy pertaining to people basically losing their minds and rioting and violence. That's one of the reasons why he told us to flee into the mountains. In other words, get away from society. But he also told us these things because of the irregularities of the weather, that if you're in a low-lying area, to go to a higher elevated area, to flee into the mountains. Go to a higher place. He didn't give us those instructions 2,000 years ago because he wanted those things to occur. He gave us those instructions because he could foresee the damage that mankind was going to be doing to the planet that was going to cause these things to happen. We are doing this to ourselves, and like I said in some of my other previous work, the scientists are only telling part of the problem pertaining to the atmospheric changes with the heat being so hot that causes evaporation to go even higher, that whenever these deluges does come out of the sky, they come out of the sky all at once, but the earth is actually heating up from the inside out, or it's heating up from the earth itself and expanding to the atmosphere, to the outer atmosphere, and it's not the outer atmosphere that's affecting our planet going back down into the earth. And for one thing that we're causing, that people don't really think about, you take just one person that lives in a home, that turns on a light bulb, that turns on a coffee pot, that operates a stove, that operates an automobile, that does their daily chores with lawnmowers or whatever. That is all artificial heat. Artificial heat that is being produced above and beyond 88 to 89 degrees, whatever the normal temperature of the human race is. We have produced all these inventions that are now putting out heat, in some cases 110, 120 degrees, 130, 140 degrees, and that's just the little stuff. That's just the little stuff. Some of the bigger stuff, like in the factories and stuff like that, we got stuff out there that topples over 1,000 degrees, that melts stuff down and does stuff. Big factories with all this type of moving parts and hydraulic fluid that gets like 140 degrees, 160 degrees hot. Whenever you have this much going on that is unnatural, you are producing artificial heat. Even by turning on a light bulb, if you got a regular 80 watt, 100 watt light bulb, they're producing enough heat that you cannot hold your hand on that light bulb for a certain length of time before it starts burning your hand. Now, some of the new lighter bulbs that they've come out with, these the LED lights and stuff like that, they don't produce that type of heat. And whenever I was out in Colorado in 2007, they had done already mandatory out there for the whole state to go, I don't forgot what they called it, but you had a certain amount of time to outfit your building, your home, your business with all this new lighting. And after that certain period of time was over with, if the safety people come out and seen that you had not changed all that stuff over, you got a fine. You got fined for not doing what the state had ordered for you to do. I don't think that they've mandated anything like that here in Tennessee, not that I'm aware of. Why? Because they haven't been taking these things serious. Keep in mind, it was the state of Tennessee that basically promoted the idea of being the climate deniers, because they made fun of their very vice president that was running for president at the time, Al Gore, that basically costed them their own presidency in the state of Tennessee, not holding up their own man because they felt like that he was out of touch with reality. And the person I'm talking about is Al Gore. Your elderly, senior citizens people at that time, which was the primary voting people 20 plus years ago, some of them are now in their 70s, some of them are now in their 60s, but they was the primary voting people that was evolving during that time of Al Gore running for president, that said that Al Gore was nothing more than a owl lover, a tree hugger, and that he was taking up the same imagery of what that they was doing out west pertaining to recognizing that these weather imbalances was real. They didn't think these weather imbalances was real. Out here in Tennessee, as far as I'm concerned, was part of the original climate deniers that took a part in being the climate deniers, that even to this day, we still have not yet fully accomplished towards climate deniers out there, such as Donald J. Trump, that still does not believe that climate changes is real. That we're actually taking a part of bringing this upon to ourselves. Matter of fact, I've talked to preachers and stuff. Oh, this is of God. This is of God. No, it's not of God. God was the one that was trying to warn us and tell us ahead of time that these was going to be the attributes of that in which what mankind was going to do, by trying to tell us ahead of time to prepare for these things. You got 8 billion people on the planet. I don't know that people can conceive that or not. There's only like 300 and something million people here in the United States. But our United States is getting fuller every day. They claim about 8,000 people's coming over to the United States down by the border every day. Every day. Which is straining our resources, straining our food supply, straining our water supply, straining the things that we have been taking advantage of, that eventually is going to have a crippling effect upon our lives. That, yes, will cause electrical disturbances pertaining to the irregularities of the forces of nature. That's exactly what I was trying to warn them people up there in Kentucky after they decided to shut the dam down and start looking for some sort of indications that this person was going to cause this type of disturbances. No, I wasn't going to cause the disturbances. Didn't have no means of causing the disturbances. It was mankind that's causing the disturbances. Instead of them being mad at me, they need to be mad at themselves because they did not listen to the messages getting out there, regardless whether it was the messages coming from Al Gore, regardless it was the messages coming from other science, regardless whether it was the messages coming from myself. They didn't want to accept reality by trying to falsely accuse us of us being out of touch with reality. Well, now, reality has slapped them in the face. And because of their arrogantness, being arrogant, they still want to be mad at Juby, the individual that's talking to you right now. They still want to take Al Gore as soon as they flip on their TV set and see him talking about these environmental changes. They still want to turn him off. You know why? Because they're arrogant, they're boastful, and they're prideful, and the Bible says that all these things comes before a fall, and they're not teachable. These people are not teachable. They are dead set that this is what they're going to do, and this is how they're going to do it, and I'll be damned hell or high water if I'm going to change. Just like my brother, I'm going to use him for an example, before he died in 2017. He hardly ever put on his seatbelt. And whenever I say hardly ever, I'm talking about less than 0.5% of 1% that he just did not believe in putting on seatbelt. And I asked him, I said, David, why don't you put on your seatbelt, man? I said, this seatbelt law now has been in power now for about 25, 30 years, maybe longer here in America. Why don't you have some sort of put seatbelt on? Oh, because, Juby, I've seen too many people that had a rollover, that their car exploded, and they burn up in their automobile. And if you don't have your seatbelt on, and if you have a rollover, it can maybe throw you out of the vehicle before the vehicle ever catches on fire and burns you up in the vehicle. Well, you know what the odds of that is, first of all, of being slung out of the vehicle, and second of all, being slung out of a vehicle while the vehicle's rolling around, you got a really strong chance that even though the vehicle may still catch a fire and burn you up if you was in the seatbelt, you got a good chance of the vehicle actually rolling over on top of you. And even though you may have survived going through the window of the vehicle, being thrown out of the vehicle because you didn't have your seatbelt on, you still got that chance, which is a strong chance of being actually the vehicle itself rolling over on top of you and killing you that way. They claim that your odds of your survival is greater, even at the exchange of a vehicle rolling over, towards you having your seatbelt on versus it not being on. But once more, leading to what I was talking about, you have people that is so dead set that they're not going to listen. They're unteachable. You can preach to them until the cows come home, and they're still not going to cooperate with the rest of the people pertaining to what the people has now decided that we need to do based around reality. Based around reality. You got people that are still walking around that are out of touch with reality, that are still claiming that environmental changes isn't real. You got people that still refuses to acknowledge that the Republican Party is the ones that's basically primarily guilty for all of this stuff that began back in the late 80s. You got people that still deniers pertaining to Donald J. Trump, election deniers saying that the election was stolen because that was what the seed that Donald J. Trump planted up into these people's hearts. What does the Bible say? Let's go back to the Bible. The Bible says that humanity loves darkness more so than they love light, which is a clear indication that reality is not something that people want to either accept or adjust their lives to. They rather believe a lie, like my brother David, that he was safer driving an automobile without his seatbelt on, based upon some stupid ideology back years ago that somebody had given him this seed of ideal that you was safer being involved in a major accident by not having your seatbelt on versus having your seatbelt on. And I guarantee you, I could have preached to him until the cows come home, and he was still not going to put on that seatbelt, just like a lot of these people that's smoking, even though they're dying of emphysema and they can't breathe and their health is deteriorating. You can tell them all day long, hey, if you continue to keep smoking, those cigarettes are going to kill you. And they refuse to acknowledge reality that the cigarettes are going to kill them. Why? Because the Bible says that mankind loves darkness versus than light. They rather believe in a lie than they would the truth. Once more, I was trying to help these people by putting out that advisory in 2007, and it got so hot that some of the turbines on some of the dams on the Tennessee River being operated by TVA had to be shut down that year. Also, a year and a half later, the state of Kentucky got about 3 inches of ice that created one massive electrical disturbances to the point that the governor himself had to put out a state of emergency on about 75 different counties. To this day, I have still not gotten no formal or informal apology pertaining to various officials that wanted to destroy my life, not only in 2007, on 2 different occasions in less than a 10-day period of time, because they come at me and confiscating my truck and throwing me in front of this psychiatrist for about 2 hours, in which she said that there's nothing wrong with me, take him back and give him back his automobile and let him go about his business, in which they didn't. The only way for me to get my automobile, I had to pay money to get it. But they come at me about less than 10 days later, and thinking that I was going to blow up the Kentucky Dam because I was trying to help these people by telling them about these electrical disturbances, about these irregular weather patterns pertaining to global warming. I had put out in the early 90s, and I got proof to verify that because I've still got the poster that I had on the side of my vehicle that said that if the bush does not give back the sword symbolizing peace on earth, that the Mississippi River would begin to start drying up. If the United States government did not do the right thing pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy, that these was going to be the attributes that humanity was going to witness, not only here in America, but throughout the world. And guess what? We are seeing those things on a day-to-day occurrence, more so today than ever before. And during the early 90s, I didn't know a daggum thing about global warming. It may have been talked about in various circles, in scientists or meteorologists. It may have been looked at in various people. But as far as it becoming mainstream like it is today, global warming didn't exist in the early 90s. Not on the level that it is today. But yet, no, I'm still being punished and looked down upon, and having people that refuses to talk to me because they're sullen like an old cat, and they rather still put me in the category like they put Al Gore in the category of being a nut or somebody that was trying to do this for some sort of celebrity purposes. And the whole time, it was people like Al Gore and people like myself that was actually trying to help these people. Just like Jesus Christ that talked about how that we needed to flee into the mountains whenever we shall see these things beginning to develop and beginning to occur. That's the reason why the Bible in Revelations talks about woe be unto the inhabitants here upon to the planet whenever you shall start to see these things materializing. Woe be unto the inhabitants of the world. Woe, woe, woe. It talks about the first woe, talks about the second woe, talks about the third woe. And as the woes increase, so does the irregularities. As the woes increase, so does the dysfunctioning of a planet that used to function one way that now is functioning in a completely different manner. The oil that we have been draining out of the ground was put there for a heat shield to eliminate the heat from the center of the earth, the core, the mantle they call it, of escaping out to the outer layers. As we are steadily draining the oil, we are steadily draining the heat shield. As we're draining the heat shield, now we're allowing for all this heat to evaporate and escape from the outer layers of the earth. Earth is kind of like an orange skin. If you know anything about an orange, you know that the size of an orange versus the size of the skin of an orange is very, very thin. Well, the outer layers that we're standing on and we work with, which is basically the depth of maybe 100 feet per se, to where we can dig holes and we can do this and we can move dirt around and we can shift this around and we can take hills and turn them into flatlands and take flatlands and build them up or do whatever. We got basically a very, very small layer to work with compared to the size of the earth. Well, whenever you're steadily taking elements out of the earth that was put there for a reason, you're going to have consequences. These are the consequences, my friends, of the beginning of the woes that you're looking at right there of the mighty Mississippi River breaking all-time records this summer of getting so low. These are also causing massive, massive irregularities pertaining to the forces of nature. It's the world that is affecting the atmosphere and not the atmosphere that is affecting the world. That's the point that I'm trying to make in all this speech about all this stuff. We are doing this to ourselves, and the reason why I know this is because the Bible talks about that if we don't repent, if we don't change our ways, if we don't wake up to reality, that God himself will come back and he will destroy humanity, because humanity is destroying the planet. And it also talks about that as you shall see the days approaching, that no flesh shall be saved, but for the elect's sake, whom the Heavenly Father has chosen, those days would be shortened. God has chosen certain people to stand up, and he always has and he always will, to give out warnings before something ever starts occurring. Moses, let's look at the liberator Moses that liberated the children of Israel. Do you really think that Moses wanted to bring the plagues to the children of Egypt during the time that those things occurred? No. What was Moses doing? Moses was working as a messenger. And he was going before the Pharaoh and telling the Pharaoh, if you don't do this, this is going to be the consequences for not doing that. And Moses had to go to this guy 10 different times, according to the Bible, before he finally acknowledged that Moses' God was, in fact, the real, true God. Now, up until then, they thought that Moses was a madman. Up until then, they thought that Moses was out of his mind, and that Moses did not know what he was talking about, and that Moses had not been selected by God towards liberating the children of Israel. And the whole time, Moses had been selected by God towards warning the Egyptians that if you do not do this, this is what's going to come upon your life. It took 10 different times. And even then, out of madness and out of retaliation, the Pharaohs still retaliated and was going to kill Moses and the rest of the children of Israel. And that's whenever God himself had to intervene with a great plague or a destruction towards killing all of the Egyptian army whenever they was trying to go after the children of Israel. And the sea basically collapsed on top of them, that drowned all of them. Drowned all of them. And there towards the last, the Pharaoh come back to his wife that had instructed him to bring back his sword with Moses' blood on it, and which she ridiculed him there towards the last and said, you could not even bring back your sword with Moses' blood on it. After the destruction of a whole government or a whole group of people pertaining to the Egyptians, the Pharaohs. So you may be saying, okay, you've made that very clear, so what's your point? My point is this. Humanity has always been hard-headed. Humanity has always loved dark versus loving light. Humanity has always resisted the truth on the front end until they was made believers on the back end. And if that's the pattern that obviously this country has set a sail for itself towards, I guarantee you the things that we are witnessing today are only going to tragically grow worse and worse and worse. In other words, what we're seeing today, as far as the lack of moisture and the heat absorbing towards evaporation of the moisture out of the earth, what we're seeing today is only going to drastically get worse next year and the year after that, until we're willing to repent and go back, just as the Bible talks about, and do our first works over again. And that's just not talking about sin. That's talking about understanding the things that we're a part of here is affecting our lives. And that means going back and redeveloping new, I'm just going to use this as an example, going back and using new methods of building a compressor that cools your ice box, but at the same time developing some sort of a invention, which it probably wouldn't take much, probably just as much of a little hose coming from the antifreeze itself out of the ice box, putting it back into the motor or around the motor, the casing of the motor. That way the motor itself does not get so hot that you cannot no longer put the back of your hand on the back of the motor without it burning your hand. And it's not just the compressors on your ice boxes that's generating this type of artificial heat. I could go on and on and on about the type of artificial heat that we're producing, from the axles going up and down the road on your automobile to your transmission getting hot, to your motor getting hot. I could go on and on and on of the artificial heat that is being generated by all our gizmos and gadgets. And if you don't believe me, if you work your telephone long enough and hard enough, and you got your hand on that phone, you can actually start feeling the heat being generated from that phone. So if you can actually touch that phone and understand that that phone is hotter than your body, that means that that phone has reached a level of being hotter than 98.2 degrees of whatever that most people's normal touch is, most people's normal blood pressure is. The earth was designed to handle that type of heat, 98.2 degrees. But whenever you invent all these inventions with all this other heat, you've now created heat that is taking the normalcy away from the atmosphere, to the point that now it becomes abnormal, and there's consequences in this. Just like if you're steadily draining all the oil out of the ground, and the oil was put there for a reason, to help to eliminate the friction of all them rocks rubbing back and forth to one another, because Earth is basically like a living organism. We used to think at one time that Earth was one big solid rock. Well, as a matter of fact, if you go back before then, we used to think that Earth was actually flat. And if you got out on a boat, you was going to fall off the ocean. It has taken a long time for humanity to finally relate to reality of these different periods of time. This is another period of time that we're going to have to wake up in reality towards what we're doing to ourselves and what we're doing to the planet. Whenever it comes to eliminating all these fossil fuels from the earth that was put there not so you and I could ride up and down our roads wearing our cool looking sunglasses with our top down and beating our chest like we was some sort of apes, being proud of this invention, this major invention that now we're all taking advantage of. But that oil was put there for a reason. And it was put there to help the earth expand and breathe and live, and you got all these different platelets that's moving in and out, up and down. You got high tides, low tides, full moon, half moon. The earth is a breathing entity of itself. like an organism. And the elements that we're pulling from the earth and the stuff that we're inventing on top of the earth pertaining to all these moving parts and gizmos and gadgets, we're doing this to ourselves. And I don't know what it's going to take before the majority of the people finally accept reality towards what we're doing and how that we're doing it to ourselves. But whenever it talks about that God has not found our works perfect yet, to go back and do our first works over again, it's not just talking about the nature of mankind towards living in sin. That's one of the biggest parts of it towards getting out of that type of environment and no longer living in sin. But that's only part of it. The other part is waking up to reality, just like they woke up to reality in the 80s and said, you know what? We're going to start mandating that mankind here in America starts wearing their seatbelt. And they started doing it in the 90s. And since then, I guarantee you, those seatbelt laws have saved a whole lot more lives than what it has taken. But now there's some people out there, like my brother was, that you could talk to them until you was black and blue in the face, and you're still not going to convince them of the facts. Well, those type of people you need to quit listening to. Those are the people you need to quit following. Those are the people that obviously has set their ways and they are dead set in believing what they believe, and they're not going to evolve into reality that seatbelt laws saves lives and not takes lives. The same way in waking up to reality of the things that I just got through telling you about, that I tried to warn people about years ago, that are now manifesting themselves on a unimaginable, unbelievable level. It is very, very uncommon. If you look at the history in the let me get it out. The Native American Indian history. If you'll go back and study their history pertaining to the great waters, the waters of the Father, they called it Father Waters, pertaining to the mighty Mississippi. It wasn't called Mississippi back in the Indian days. If you'll study their history, you will see that the mighty Mississippi only got low only a couple different times during the span of, let's say, a couple hundred years. To see the Mississippi River go this low once in a lifetime is a phenomenon. To see the mighty Mississippi go low 5 or 6 times in my lifetime goes beyond a phenomenon. Now we're talking about something has went totally off the charts, to the point that I personally, in my 61 years of living, should not be looking at a dried up Mississippi River as many times as what I have. So obviously, global warming is real, regardless whether you want to be a climate denier or not, regardless whether you want to be a seatbelt buckler denier or not, like my brother was. He's dead now, God bless his soul. But you've got people going to have to wake up in the, not so much the new facts of what we're discovering, but the blinded facts, are the denial facts that now are no longer denying in any form or fashion. That you cannot debate the things that I just got through telling you about, as far as seeing it with your own eyes, the mighty Mississippi River breaking all-time records, while the individual that was trying to put out that information was being laughed at, dehumanized, He was being demonized. He was being mocked. He was being ignored. He lost friends on account of it. And now we're starting to see where this individual, rather than trying to hurt society, in reality was trying to help society. You don't put out warnings and advisories because you're trying to harm or hurt somebody. That's just like the weatherman, the meteorologist. Whenever there's inclement weather in the area, he don't tell people to seek shelter because he's trying to hurt them, knowing that there's inclement weather, some sort of disturbance, tornado, whatever, coming down the pike. He don't tell them those things to hurt those people. He tells them those things to try to help those people. And you know another thing that you don't see law enforcement going and arresting these people that's trying to help these people, because that would be counterproductive in society trying to be a self-sustainable society. But now yet no, I go to jail, I get my truck confiscated from me in 2007, but yet no, there was a major ice storm in 2009. Yet no, in 2007, during the time that I was trying to tell these people these things, the Tennessee River got so low that there was electrical disturbances pertaining to the turbines being shut down. Well, yet no, if you get to looking at the Colorado River pertaining to the Lake Mead, it's going to become so low that, if, like I said, unless they have some sort of earth-moving, changing deal going on, we're going to see the very dam that was built, I guess back in the 20s or the 30s, no longer going to be functional towards doing what it was originally built for. Why? Why are we going to see these things? Because of overpopulation? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it's the pure mere fact that we didn't listen, and now we have become adjusted to all these gizmos and gadgets. It's putting out all this artificial heat, and the fact that we have taken advantage of Mother Earth towards draining all her resources out of the ground. And now we're starting to see the consequences. You see, you can't see the wind. Ordinarily, you can't see the wind. Even if the wind's blowing 200 miles an hour, you can't see the wind. But I tell you what you can see. You can see the consequences of, after the wind gets through, towards people's houses being destroyed, or trees being torn down, or other types of elements that you see the characteristics of. That's what we're seeing right now pertaining to global warming. We're seeing the aftermath. We're seeing the consequences of not doing the right thing. Going back and doing thy first works over again, just like it talks about in the first 4 chapters of Revelations. Repent, repent, repent. Go back, go back. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Get in the right frame of reality. Rather than be somebody hard-headed like my brother. You know, the odds of you rolling over your automobile and it throwing you out and you not being either killed because the automobile rolled over on top of you versus you being captured in the fuselage and the automobile catching a fire and you burning up in the automobile is probably 10,000 to 1. In other words, you could be involved in 10,000 accidents, and either the automobile itself wouldn't catch a fire, and you would be much safer in being in the seatbelt versus being thrown out. But I guarantee you, out of those 10,000 times that you've seen the same type of rollover wreck, there ain't no telling how many times that people are going to be killed. Even though they get thrown out of the windshield, they're going to be killed. If they don't get killed because of massive bleeding of being thrown through a windshield, they're going to be killed a whole lot more times of a vehicle rolling over on top of them than they are towards the vehicle catching a fire. There's too many safety features on vehicles today that whenever they do roll over or lose gravity like that, there's too many safety features on these cars to where the gas pump automatically shuts itself off. And besides that, whenever it comes to all the power going through the automobile, if I'm not mistaken, on these newer ones, it's got the fuses and all, they're set up to where it basically will blow a fuse to where all your electronics will basically no longer be functionable. Well, if you don't have no electronics going, if you don't have no electricity going through all those electronics, it's almost impossible to create a fire in an automobile accident unless there's an actual spark. And that actual spark has to be ignited at a certain area, and the odds of that happening towards that occurring is like probably 1,000 to 1, or maybe even greater than that, maybe 2,000 to 1. I don't know what the statistics are. I know this automobiles are getting safer every day, and they're creating new inventions on these automobiles every day to prevent from fires like that happening, because they study this stuff. What is that deal on TV where you can learn a lot from a dummy? These automobile industries study these vehicles again and again and again, pretending to rollovers, pretending to being hit in the ass end of an automobile. They take a certain amount of, they have to. EPA requires for them to do this. Safety regulations requires for them to make sure that that automobile can withhold the standards of what they require for that automobile to withhold, and then they grade that automobile to where it's a 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star on safety features. I think your Audis and your Toyotas and maybe one or two other cars out there are like supposed to be the safest ones out there. That's the reason why you see so many people up in your Rocky Mountains high ranges driving these Toyota Land Cruisers. It's supposed to be the safest vehicle out there, even if it rolls over involving in going off of a cliff somewhere. It's supposed to be the safest vehicle to be in without it actually killing you. Of course, you got to have pretty deep pockets to be able to afford a Land Rover or something like that. But I mean, still, I'm just saying, there's safety feature ratings on every vehicle from A to Z, regardless whether it's one that gets hit in the back end or one that gets rolled over, and you can study them because they've studied them. It's a requirement that they have to be studied. And some of these studies, they figure out that the safety feature was wrong or something went wrong, and they have to do a recall on that vehicle. By law, they have to call them vehicles back, and they have to make adjustments on them vehicles because something obviously has went wrong. Either a part malfunctioned or something. Well, something has gone wrong for the mighty Mississippi River to get low as many times as I've seen it in my lifetime. And this year, it's broke all-time records.
Relief soon, we're all going to feel it as the cost of shipping will spike.
The price of moving a bushel of soybeans went up 300%, and there are thousands of barges full of food that can't be moved in these low river levels. The Army Corps of Engineers says they're watching water levels closely, but if the problem goes on, they may have a solution.
To a point. In 1989 and then again in 2012, we got to an area where to a level where the channel was almost unsustainable. So we had numerous dredges working, and there was very little commerce going through it. Ultimately, what saved the day was rain.
Now that was 3 major events in my lifetime that I've experienced of it getting as low as what it is now towards breaking all-time records. But beyond that, the river has gotten so low at times, even though it didn't break all-time records, it was still abnormal for it to get that low. it's one thing for the river to get full and to stay full to the point that it becomes dangerous that they have to shut down the ferry on the river because the river has gotten too full. That's more of a normalcy of seeing a body of water like we're seeing in the middle of America than seeing it get this low this many times. He just talked about 3 major events that was this low, breaking records. But since my life, I have seen the mighty Mississippi get low. I know 5 or 6 different times, 3 of them breaking records, and the other 2 or 3 almost getting close enough to break records, which is very abnormal. That's the point that I'm trying to make. This is abnormal. These are signs that we should have been paying close enough attention to, that we should have started evaluating our lifestyles and what we're doing and what's going on here, even the first time that it happened in '89, whenever the weather changed the way that it did. We're not listening to Mother Nature. And I use this adjective, that the more abnormal that our society becomes, the more abnormal that the forces of nature becomes. That it's almost like a mirroring effect of looking at a mirror, okay? And we're down here on the planet looking up while the forces of nature is up there looking down. And as they see from up in their perspective how abnormal that we're living and the wickedness that we're living and not paying attention to our safety features and what we're doing to ourselves down here, the more abnormal that the human race down here on the earth becomes, the more abnormal that the forces of nature becomes. It's almost as if it was a child, an infant, throwing a literal tantrum that the Bible talks about, for these will be the sorrows. These will be the signs of knowing that you are in the last days. Thanks again for listening to us. Good luck to all of us. We want to thank you for your prayers, for your time. We want to say good luck to each and every one of us. God bless America. God bless our endeavors. God bless our military. And hopefully, before it's too late, we will awaken so that we can eliminate a great deal of more of misery and hardship that we have no one to blame but ourselves. We are our worst enemy. And the Bible teaches us that again and again and again throughout the scriptures, because we don't listen and we're not willing to evolve. We're not willing to accept the fact that, hey, this invention is a good invention towards creating these seat belts. Put yourself in a seat belt. Your odds of your survival of your vehicle surviving that accident, which hopefully you're not involved in an accident, but we know that accidents occur. Even if it's a rollover accident, your odds of surviving that accident with being buckled up is like 1,000 times greater than what it would be if you wasn't buckled up. The ideology of being thrown out of a vehicle because the vehicle catches a fire is like 10,000 to 1 of that actually occurring that way, to the point that you actually got thrown out and your vehicle caught a fire, and fortunately you wasn't in the vehicle to perish.
Day was rain.
Ooh, that video. These days, when you wish for rain, you have to specify, not all at once. The Midwest is still recovering from summer flash floods, and if that water cycle whiplashes again, hard rain on parched earth would be another blow to farmers already struggling to move their harvest.
Abnormalities. Once more, it can shift just as quick to the left as it does to right. We're talking about the forces of nature, basically being being removed from its regular cycle to the point that now it's acting very, very peculiar, or it's out of touch with its own patterns to where it's now creating these new patterns. It's imbalanced. Mother Nature has become imbalanced. It's no longer balanced like it used to be. It's imbalanced. Now it's up to us to figure out what in the world is causing this. Why are these excessive, major forces of nature continuously doing these things? And if we're not smart enough to analyze the problem and then work upon the problem, just like I said, somebody could invent a hose just as easy as a hose coming out of part of your refrigerator, going back to the initial motor that gets so hot that you can't hold your hand on it, and have that box, have that motor put into a box to where the cooling exacerbates that whole motor to the point that now you don't have that artificial heat that's expanding from that particular refrigerator. And you may be thinking, well, that's just the refrigerator getting hot. Yeah, it is. But whenever you combine that with 8 billion refrigerators, because 8 billion people need refrigerators, now you're talking about a different type of entity. Our world was made to sustain 98.2 degrees. If the motor on your refrigerator gets so hot that you cannot hold your hand on it while the pistons is running, while the thing is working, to the point that it'll burn you, that goes beyond 98.2 degrees. That's getting on the level of 110, 120 degrees. What is it? Boiling in water is 220 or something like that. I mean, these irregular temperatures of our inventions that we're creating is helping to cause this, along with draining the oil out of the ground and all the resources out of the ground, as well as all the carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere. You know, at one time they used to think it was cows that was causing this. They used to think that cows was causing the greenhouse effect. Then they thought, well, no, it's not the cows. It's radiation cooling. So they changed everything. They made it a law to where all the manufacturers by the year 2000 had to rotate over into using standard R12 to using now R134 Freon, which is about 3 to 4 degrees warmer than what the R12 is. And so they had to make some changes in the way that they built these cars. So they started putting tinted windows on the cars. That way the sunlight coming into the car in the dead summertime would help to confiscate that 2 to 3 to 4 degrees differences of what your R12 used to produce, that now your R134 is no longer producing. So they had to do something to confiscate the differences in your fuselages of your automobiles. So that's how they done that. They worked that out that way. But I'm still telling you, we're going to have to redesign a lot of our independent inventions, and we're going to have to eliminate using all the fossil fuel out of the ground, and we're going to have to make some dramatic changes in how that we produce what we produce, in the way that we produce it, if we are going to be a self-sustainable planet. If not, we're going to head off into areas that are going to be unimaginable in the next few years. I'm talking about absolutely unimaginable. Whenever you see rains fall in Pakistan that floods over 1 million structures, that affects over 12 or 14 million people, that's unimaginable. When you see areas in some parts of the world that gets so dry that even the lions and the tigers and the livestock, the cows and stuff can't even live because it's unbearable. Yes, that's what we're going to witness if we don't wake up and if we don't change our ways. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. And God bless you. And may heaven help us all. Shalom.